كتاب الله للأرواح نور تنال به السعادة والسرور إلى درب الهدى والخير يهدي وللجنات يوصل من يسير كتاب الله للأرواح نور
تبارك مودع البركات فيه فليس لفضله أبدا قصور فمن بركاته عقل سليم ورأي صائب فكر منير ورأي صائب فكر منير فيا من أقبلوا للحفظ بشرى فإن السعي منكم لا يبور جنيتم من ثمار الحسن حسنا وأقبلت العطايا والأجور
كتاب الله للأرواح نور تنال به السعادة والسرور إلى درب الهدى والخير يهدي وللجنات يوصل من يسير كتاب الله للأرواح نور
بيوت قبله كانت قبورا فأحياها وكان به النشور تنزلت السكينة في رباها وأمطرها من الرحمات نور فللقرآن فلنبذل ونسعى فغيث الفضل هاتان غزير نعيم في الحياة ومكرمات وفي
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. Welcome to another live stream from the Islamic Peace channel. Today I'm joined with our resident speaker, Brother Maheer. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullah.
I'll be your host for the evening. My name is Ismail. And as you see by the title, our topic today is about Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, the great man, most well known for being the liberator of Jerusalem. So we won't waste any more time. We'll start off with the first question to Maheer. So just before we get into the life of the great Sultan, can you briefly tell us about how the Middle East was before his reign?
So assalamu alaikum everyone. I think it's very important that before we actually go into the life of Sultan Salahuddin, that we sort of contextualize the period he's in and why obviously Jerusalem is so important, especially at that period. It is a very contested place. So, I mean, the Fatimids in Egypt, the Shia Khilafah, they want it. The Abbasids, the Zangis, the Seljuks, they want it. Then also the Crusaders, they're fighting to keep it. So it's a very, very contested place. But just before, obviously, we go into the 11th and 12th century, let's just briefly go back to when the Muslims actually took Jerusalem. So obviously, after the Prophet Muhammad's death, the Muslims, they launched a really invasion on a mass scale of Syria and Iraq. The Persians and the Romans, And by about in the 630s, the late 630s, they've taken Jerusalem. They've completely destroyed Persia, the Persian Empire, and the Roman Empire, and the Rashidun Khilafah. Obviously, everybody knows Umar radiallahu anhu. He went to Jerusalem himself. He gave the covenant of Umar, and so until the 11th century, the Muslims, they keep Jerusalem. It's always been under Muslim control. The varying Khilafahs keep it under their control. And then in the late 11th century, about around the 1090s, the Pope Urban, he obviously calls for the First Crusade to take Jerusalem. And one of his intentions were, some people say, it's actually to take Jerusalem. Some people say it's to help the Byzantine Empire, make the West come and sort of give some help to the Byzantine Empire, which was just falling crazily to Muslim control. And so the First Crusade starts, and in 1099, the Crusaders, they take Jerusalem, and they establish 4 kingdoms: the Kingdom of Jerusalem and varying other ones in Tripoli, Antioch, and various areas around the Levant area. And so, and when they take Jerusalem, their own chronicles, if you read the chronicles of William of Tyre, I can't remember the other person's name, but if you just search up things like that, you'll find that in their own chronicles they mention that when they took Jerusalem, the Crusaders, they killed so many Muslims that the blood of the Muslims, it flowed all the way up to the ankles of their horses. That's how much there is. The city was drenched in blood. And so until about 1187, they keep Jerusalem. Now, in the sort of mid-12th century, in the 1130s, 1140s, a man called Zangi, Imad ad-Din Zangi, he begins the process of fighting the Crusaders, and he really ignites the jihad in the Muslims, because the Muslims were very, very divided at that time. There were so many Muslim states at that time, all trying to fight each other, and they were more concentrated on fighting each other than fighting themselves. And that is, historians mention, one of the main reasons the Crusaders managed to take Jerusalem so quickly. Because you have to imagine the territory the Crusaders had to cross. They had to cross Seljuk territory and come into the Khilafah of the Fatimid Shia Khilafah, and they had to come and they take Jerusalem, which is in the heart of Muslim territory. On the north you have the Seljuks, they're in Syria. Then on the south you have the Fatimids. And so they were so disunited that the Crusaders could come all the way to Jerusalem with barely any resistance and then take Jerusalem very easily. And so Zangi, he begins the process of taking this, and by 1143 or 1144, he's taken Mosul, I think, or Aleppo, of the Crusaders. And so his fighting ignites the Second Crusade, which Nur ad-Din, he defeats. He defeats the Second Crusade in the 1140s, and he continues the fight against the Crusaders. And he just continues to fight them, launches massive campaigns into the Crusader territories, but obviously he doesn't have the Muslims, they aren't united enough and doesn't have enough resources to fight the Crusaders on a mass scale. So that is literally what's been happening in the region at that time.
Yeah, you've given us a concise history of that time. You've talked about the disunity of the Muslims, the division, and how it was so easy for the Crusaders to actually get into Jerusalem and take it. You briefly mentioned Nur ad-Din, who might ring some bell to some people. He is not a well-known figure, but in the story of our topic for today, Salahuddin, he does actually have a role in his life. So who was he exactly, and what exactly was his role in the conquest of Jerusalem?
So Nur ad-Din is a very, very interesting figure, and some historians, they actually make the claim that it was because of Nur ad-Din that Salahuddin was able to take Jerusalem, because of the foundations he laid. So Nur ad-Din, he was the son of Imad ad-Din Zangi, and he was the ruler of the Zangi dynasty. They were sort of like a breakaway dynasty of the Seljuks ruling in Syria. And so he's the ruler of the Zangi dynasty, and he ignites the jihad in the Muslims. Really, really, really ignites the zeal to fight the Crusaders amongst the Muslims again. And he begins the process of uniting the Muslims. He makes a lot of attempts to also take Egypt, and he does that in the 1170s by sending a couple of armies there on various campaigns, and then Salahuddin obviously becomes the vizier. And he was also Salahuddin's master, like his overlord basically. When Salahuddin first served under him, then obviously when Nur-ad-Din died, Salahuddin became independent and took Egypt and Syria. One interesting thing about Nur-ad-Din, to really show how focused he was on taking Jerusalem, is that he actually made a pulpit while he was in Syria, and he told his followers that if we take Jerusalem, this pulpit that I've made, I will put in Masjid al-Aqsa. And obviously when Salahuddin takes the Jerusalem, he brings Nur-ad-Din's pulpit and puts it there. And this sort of destroys the claim that a lot of people are saying that, Salahuddin was, he didn't like Nur-ad-Din, he just wanted to make his own independent dynasty and break away from Nur-ad-Din, and he wanted to, make an empire. But if he wanted to make an empire, why would he have so much respect that instead of, making a pulpit himself and placing that in Masjid al-Aqsa, he brings Nur-ad-Din's one all the way from Syria? So this sort of destroys the argument that a lot of people make, saying, Salahuddin was a lot like he was an imperialist, he wanted to create his own empire and things like that, because he actually brought Nur-ad-Din's pulpit all the way from Syria. He could have made one himself, engraved lots of things about himself in it and really boost his status amongst the Muslim world, but instead he brings his mentor Nur-ad-Din's one. So in a nutshell, that is who Nur-ad-Din is.
Yeah, that's a lot of information we've heard about him. We heard that Salahuddin was actually his student. It's quite interesting that you mentioned that minbar. So it sort of symbolizes the mental struggle that many Muslims were going through at that time, the divisions, and how he had to do something to unite them, and maybe that was just a symbol of that. So I guess what we're talking about now, as we go away from Nur-ad-Din and after him, how did Salahuddin serve under Nur-ad-Din, and how did he actually rise to power?
Okay, so Salahuddin, he first came to power in not really came to power, but basically his father and his uncle mainly, was one of the top commanding officers in Nur-ad-Din's army. His name was Asad-Din Shirkuh. If you read in books, you'll find his name as Shirkuh. So he was Salahuddin's uncle actually, and he was a very high-ranking official in Nur-ad-Din's army. And Nur-ad-Din would obviously. So what was happening in the Jerusalem and Egypt was that there was a what's his name? There was a vizier in Egypt. His name was Shawar, and he was a hypocrite. He was instigator basically. He would go and he would make alliances with Jerusalem, and he would make alliances with Nur-ad-Din, and he would sometimes invite King Amaurik of Jerusalem to come into his lands and fight Nur-ad-Din, and sometimes he would tell Nur-ad-Din to come and fight Amaurik. So he was a bit of an idiot. And so what happened was Nur-ad-Din, one day he just Shawar knew that Nur-ad-Din was coming for him. He knew at one point, because of everything he'd done, all the hypocrisy and all this stupid stuff he'd done, he knew Nur-ad-Din's coming for him, and that's it. He is gonna invade and he's gonna chop Shawar's head off. So what Shawar does, Shawar the vizier of Egypt, the Fatimid Khilafah, he tells Amaurik, you come to Jerusalem, I'll let you take Jerusalem, but let me remain the overlord of Jerusalem, of Egypt. So Shawar, he's making a deal with Amaurik to come and take Egypt, while so Nur-ad-Din doesn't take it. Now, Nur-ad-Din gets word of this, and Nur-ad-Din, he sends Shirkuh at the head of a large army to go and fight Amaurik and stop him. And Nur-ad-Din Shirkuh is successful, and he defeats the Crusaders. And this time, all the other times that Shirkuh had come to Egypt with Nur-ad-Din's army, he'd left. He'd went and he'd go back to Syria. He would defeat the Crusaders, or he would, deal with the Shawar, and he would go back to Syria. But this time, he stayed in Egypt. And then and so this is when Salahuddin starts rising to power, because Salahuddin, during his upbringing, he was very a pious person, and he really wanted to become a scholar. And if you read Ibn Shaddad's account of Salahuddin's life, Salahuddin actually says that I was scared. I didn't want to go with my uncle to Egypt to fight the Crusaders, because Salahuddin wanted to be a scholar. He wanted to be a pious person. So his upbringing was mainly around, Islamic education, knowledge, ilm, a deep understanding of Islamic sciences. That's what he was raised as. But obviously, fate made him go to Egypt, and under Shirkuh's army, he commanded one of the wings in Shirkuh's army. I think the right wing or the left wing, I'm not sure. And you can really see how much influence and power Salahuddin had at that time, because Ibn Shaddad's account again mentions that Shirkuh, he never did anything without consulting and taking advice of Salahuddin. If you read Ibn Shaddad's account, it's called The Rare and Excellent History of Salahuddin. And so Shirkuh, he basically kills Shawar, he executes him for all the stuff he's done, and he dies. And after he dies, Shirkuh, now the Fatimid Khilafah, his name was Al-Adid, and he thinks Salahuddin, he's a very young guy, he's only 30 at that time, 30 something, early 30s, and he's thinking, young guy, what's he gonna do? Let's make him vizier, I can easily control him, make him do what I want. But little did he know, Salahuddin, he was a he's a political genius. He was so skilled in the actions he took. And so he appoints Salahuddin as vizier. Now, as vizier, we see he was appointed vizier without Nur-ad-Din's Nur-ad-Din's approval. And so we see the first sort of strife beginning between Salahuddin and Nur-ad-Din. The dislike that starts there. And so once Salahuddin becomes vizier, and Nur-ad-Din quickly takes his army away from Egypt, so that Salahuddin can't really have too much power there. And so Salahuddin, we can see as a time in Egypt, some of the things he does really highlights how much of a genius he was. So he begins, obviously, with direction from Nur-ad-Din and the Abbasid Khilafah, and also his own father Al-Ayyub. He starts shifting the Shia Khilafah towards a Sunni Khilafah. Without Al-Adid even knowing, he starts to establish Maliki and Shafi'i schools of fiqh in Egypt. And Al-Adid, he has no idea what's happening. And Salahuddin starts killing off a lot of the high-ranking officials and ministers in the Shia Khilafah, and starts placing his own family. So, it's sort of like, make sure that he's secure, his political position is secure, because his family, he trusts them, and he's always giving them gifts, lots and lots of gifts, so that his people, they stay on his side. And when the Al-Adid starts asking some questions, eventually saying all these guys getting killed off, Salahuddin just says, they were rebelling against you, they were plotting against you, so I had to kill them. And then this really shows how powerful he was at the age, early 30s, and a huge a number of soldiers, especially mainly the Africans, the black Africans in his in the the Fatimid army, they start rising up against him, and there's about 50,000 of them. And Salahuddin, he crushed the whole rebellion, and that really shows an early 30s. At that time, early 30s is a very, very young age to be a ruler in that position, and he destroys such a large rebellion against him. And then obviously Nur-ad-Din, Nur-ad-Din and Salahuddin, they sort of come together to work together to try and take Jerusalem, to try and fight the Crusaders. And what happens is Nur-ad-Din tells Salahuddin, you attack from Egypt, I'll attack from Syria, and then we're attacking them on two fronts. They don't have the manpower to deal with that. Although Jerusalem is still quite strong at that time, Amalric, he still has a very powerful army. You can't fight a battle on two fronts against the wealth of Egypt and the manpower of Syria. It's not possible. Okay, so now what happens is when Nur-ad-Din goes to fight, Salahuddin sort of comes towards the Crusader area, but then he goes back. And a lot of sources differ between what actually happened. Some say because of political instability in Egypt, his position is threatened. Some also say that, Salahuddin didn't really want to fight them at that time. So a lot of different varying things. But whatever the reason is, regardless, this creates the internal strife between the two. And this happens on a couple occasions. And then Nur-ad-Din goes, you know what? I've had enough of this guy. He's not listening to what I'm telling him. He's getting too powerful. I'm going to go take an army, march against him, and I want to bring him. I'm going to call him to account for the stuff that he's doing. And so, again, we go back to Ibn Shaddad's account. He says that all his advisors told Salahuddin, all of Salahuddin's advisors told him that, okay, Nur-ad-Din's coming, we've got to fight him, we've got to deal with him. Now, what happens is, when Nur-ad-Din comes to, so when Nur-ad-Din starts marching his army, all of his advisors start telling him, we've got to deal with him, he's going to come and he's going to take us all, we're going to lose all our power. And Salahuddin, he was the only person who said, no, I'm not going to fight him because he's my lord, he's taught me so many things, I'm not going to fight him, no way. And Ibn Shaddad says that Salahuddin stuck to this position that he's not going to fight Nur ad-Din until the day Nur ad-Din died. And Nur ad-Din, luckily, he died just before his army really started marching out and coming to Egypt. So this sort of gave Salahuddin it was massive relief for him, because now he's, Nur ad-Din's coming. What is he going to do? He can't fight, doesn't want to fight him, but if he doesn't fight him, he's going to lose his power. So, and Nur ad-Din passes away. And obviously, it wasn't natural causes. There isn't, historians don't really talk about much speculation of any, Salahuddin poisoning or anything. There are no claims like that. So it was a natural death. This is something important to know. And then lastly, this is really a sign of what a absolute genius Salahuddin is. And this is when he takes Syria. So obviously Nur ad-Din, he had Syria under the Zangid dynasty. Now, when Nur ad-Din dies, his child heir becomes the ruler. I think he wasn't even in his teens yet. I think he was 8 years old, something like that. And his name was Salih, and he becomes the ruler of the Zangid dynasty. Now, what happens is his sort of regent, his vizier, the person who, is the de facto in control of the Zangid dynasty. Obviously, after Nur ad-Din dies, an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, he can't take control of such a large empire. So his, regent, he starts sort of trying to secure power and getting rid of a lot of emirs of, so for example, the main one, like emirs of Damascus, emirs of various cities in Syria. He tries getting rid of them, tries like killing them or imprisoning them. And obviously Salahuddin, he could take his army and he could take Syria. With all this political instability, he could easily get his army, and he could take Syria if he wanted to, but he doesn't. And instead, this is what he does. He promises Salih that I will protect you from anybody who tries to harm you. You are my master's son, and I will try to protect you. He promises himself to be a sword for Salih against any enemies. And then, while Salih's regent tries killing off a lot of the emirs, what one of the emirs does is he calls Salahuddin and says, "I need your help. You need to come. You need to stop this." And this is when he takes his army and he goes to Syria. Now, what's so great about this? What's amazing about this is that Salahuddin, by doing this, by waiting to be called into Syria by the emirs of Syria, instead of going himself, he looks like a liberator and not a usurper. If he goes and as soon as Nur ad-Din dies and he takes the throne of the Zangids, he looks like a usurper. His master's died. Okay, I'm going to take it now. I'm going to come with my army. I'm going to kill all of it. I'm going to take it. He looks like a usurper. But instead of going there, he goes as a liberator. He goes and he saves the Zangid dynasty from collapse, the empire from collapse. He goes and that's why people see him as a liberator, because he goes and he keeps the dynasty united. He stops it from fracturing into different cities, because that's what would have happened. The emirs, they're not going to give up their power, and Salih's regent, he's telling them, you need to come. So they're going to literally be rebelling against the Zangid dynasty. But Salahuddin goes there and he goes into Damascus, and literally people come out and they welcome him into Damascus because they see him as this guy. He saved the dynasty from collapse, and he is Nur ad-Din's spiritual successor. There is no one else who could have filled Nur ad-Din's the legacy he left behind. No one could fill Nur ad-Din's boots like other than Salahuddin. Because really, he's the only one who had that power, who had the experience and things like that to actually go and keep Syria. And by doing this, now he's got Syria and he's got Egypt under his control. Now, after he takes Syria and he takes Egypt, what does he do? He goes to he starts fighting against the Crusaders a little bit. We have the Battle of Mont Gisard, which, due to a rare tactical error by Salahuddin, he actually loses. Now, obviously, Salahuddin, what he would do, the problem with fighting the Crusaders is he would go with his army, and the Crusaders will stay in a very tight formation, and they have broad shields, armored, and even with arrows of constantly bombarding them, it's very hard to break their formation. And because of this, Salahuddin, he really found it difficult to fight them. And then whenever he would go to fight the Crusaders, political instability in Syria and Egypt would call him back. So it was very, very difficult for him to actually go. And this is the argument some people make, that why did Salahuddin not take Jerusalem earlier? Instead, he went and he fought Muslims. He went and fought the Muslim corrupt rebellions in Syria and Egypt, and he actually went to Mesopotamia and he fought them there because he needed to unite the Muslims. Because a lot of the time he would go to campaign in Jerusalem in the Crusader states, and then the Muslims, they would rebel. they would try to make alliances with the Jerusalem, with all these different Christians and things. So he had to go back and he had to constantly fight them. And so by the mid 1180s, he's taken Mesopotamia. Now, this is something else that shows his military skill and just his general leadership, how good he was. While campaigning Mesopotamia, the Crusaders, they attack. Now, he receives word in Mesopotamia in his tent that the Crusaders are now attacking our towns. What should we do? Salahuddin's response was amazing. You'll find this in Stanley Lane Poole's account of the fall of Jerusalem by Salahuddin. What he says is that let them attack our towns. They are taking small towns while we are taking grand cities. When we come back, we will be much stronger. We'll be in a much stronger position to fight the Crusaders. So this is in response to what the Crusaders were doing. They're taking towns and things like that. And also another encounter he had with the Crusaders was at Al-Fulay, or Al-Fula, however you want to say it, during King Guy of Lusignan, during his regency. He fought them, and obviously again, due to supply issues and political instability, he had to withdraw. So, this is how Salahuddin essentially rose to power, by taking first Egypt as vizier, then Syria through his political ingenuity, then taking Mesopotamia through his military ingenuity. And by doing that, he had surrounded the Crusaders on many fronts. And one more thing, he also took Yemen. So the Red Sea was under his control now. He could tax all trade coming there and things like that. And also, there's one more thing that he did that really allowed him to rise as the champion of Sunni Islam, is that while this guy, some people call him Reynold, some people call him Reginald, so we'll just go with Reynold because that's what is referred to in many books. Reynold of Chatillon. He was the Lord of Kerak in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and he was the Muslim sources more, they describe him as a pirate instead of a lord. And what he did is he would often attack Muslim pilgrims that were going to the Hijaz, Mecca, Medina for Hajj, for Umrah, these things, and he would attack them. And so Salahuddin, first time when he heard the news, he said, I swear I'm going to kill this guy. And so what happened is, Reynold, he took a small navy, and this is the second time. So the first time he tried going, he killed a lot of the Muslims, and obviously then Salahuddin laid siege to Kerak and didn't work because of supply issues, things like that. The second time, this was really, wow, it was Reynold, he says that I swear I will kill the Muslims, I will destroy the Kaaba, I will take the sheep herder out of his grave, and I will put his head on the gates of Medina or Makkah, I'm not sure which one. Salahuddin, he became enraged. He said, I swear, wallahi, I will take this guy's head with my own hands. I will kill him with my own sword. And he sends and so what Reynold does is he takes a navy and he tries to attack Medina and Mecca. But obviously, Salahuddin had prepared for this, and he sends his brother with a navy from Egypt, and they destroy Reynold, who escapes, but they take a lot of prisoners, Crusader prisoners, and they end up killing a lot of them. And so by doing this, Salahuddin's position as the protector of the two holy states is reinforced. It shows that I am the protector of two holy states, two holy sites. I've stopped 2 attacks now. I've secured the Hijaz route. So I am the protector of things, and I am the ruler of Sunni Islam. Of course, you have the Abbasid Khilafah, but at that time they were very, very small, and they're mainly seen as like spiritual leaders instead of actual military and political leaders. So this is, in a nutshell, of course, very briefly, how Salahuddin rose to power.
Yeah, a lot of information there about Salahuddin is clearly, we can clearly see that from his hesitation at the start of even going to Egypt, and how his expertise, how his knowledge has actually led him to this point. It's clear to see how well he was respected and how much of a stronghold he had of the area of the Middle East. So now at the end, as you mentioned, Reynold and how the Crusaders are actually starting to feel threatened by his presence. What exactly was it, as we focus on an important few years, about 1185 to 1187, where the Jerusalem topic really starts gaining speed? So what were the Crusaders doing at the time to repel against the threat of Salahuddin?
Yeah, so this is also very, very important, because while assessing leadership of Salahuddin, we also need to assess the other factors. A lot of people forget Salahuddin, he's seen as the figure to liberate Jerusalem, but a lot of people forget that Salahuddin, there were a lot of things that went in his favor. And this is one thing, I would say, the second most important factor for the, aside from the leadership of Salahuddin, for the liberation of Jerusalem. And it was the weakness of the Crusader states. Now, obviously, after they established their kingdoms, the 4 kingdoms in 1099, after they take Jerusalem, they established 4 kingdoms. And from the beginning, it is rooted in political instability. During the choosing of the first king, they're choosing who needs to be the king. One guy refuses. They ask one guy, he refuses. Another guy, he's sworn in but not really liked because nobody really wants him. Stuff like that. But it's not really, doesn't really become important. Doesn't really impact the Crusader state, because even at that time they're still expanding. They take Ascalon a few years later. They're constantly raiding Egypt. They're up north. They're fighting as well against Byzantium and things like that. It's fine. The political instability at that time isn't very strong or anything like that. So in Amalric's reign, and he was ruling in the sort of 1150s, 60s that time, and obviously also into the early 1170s, I believe. So he is fine during his time. There isn't much political instability, but it starts happening through his marriages and things like that. But it's fine at that time because he's still expanding into Egypt and things like that. But just one more thing, before Amalric's reign, or during his reign, before that actually, the Crusader states, they do start losing territory to the Muslims. Like I've mentioned before, Zangi taking Mosul, and then also Nur ad-Din constantly attacking the Crusaders and taking land off them, Damascus, these things. So they are still getting weakened, but they're still in a very, very strong position. They still have a lot of wealth, and they're still managing to fight. Like they managed to launch invasions into Egypt against the Fatimi Khilafah, which, although itself is rooted in political instability, is still very, very strong. It's during Baldwin IV. Now, Baldwin IV was the son of King Amalric. He becomes king at a very young age. He's still a child. So what happens is the regency is given to a man called Raymond III, Count of Tripoli. He's a very, very important character in the story. Now, during his time, a constant influx of new people coming from the west start coming into the Crusader kingdom, and they sort of form a faction in the court. They're called the Outsiders. Some people call them the Hawks. Obviously, historically, the Hawks and Doves are something that are attributed to many courts. It's like a general term. Hawks are given to like people who favor war, that have the aggressive side in the court, whereas the Doves, or Doves, however you want to say it, they're more like the side who prefer truce, armistices, diplomatic approach, things like that. So during Baldwin IV's reign, the political instability gets very, very high. So first we have Raymond ruling as the regent. Then when Baldwin becomes of age, he takes over the rulership, and then he sort of starts to fall out of favor with Raymond. And this leads to political instability because Raymond, so it's over Baldwin's sister. Now, Raymond tries to get Baldwin's sister married to someone else to secure his position, make him more strong in the court. Raymond tries to get Baldwin's sister, Sibylla, married to someone he wants so that he strengthens his position in the court. But Baldwin senses this, and he marries her to Guy of Lusignan. He is very, very one of the most important figures who arguably lost Jerusalem for the Crusaders. Now, Guy marries Sibylla, and so Guy, he's like the leader of the sort of outsider party, and he's very aggressive. And Baldwin, he has leprosy. And it's very difficult for him. That's why he has to give. And his leprosy gets so bad at that time that he has to give control to Guy to become regent. Now, when Guy becomes regent, we witness the first actions of Reynold of Kerak against the Muslims, and Salahuddin tells Guy, to punish him for what he did, and Guy refuses because Reynold is also part of the outsider party, and he really favors war against Salahuddin and is a big supporter of Guy, so Guy can't really punish him. And this gets Baldwin very angry, and he falls out of favor with Guy, and it leads to him making Raymond regent again. And so this sort of insinuates and really makes the rivalry between Guy and Raymond a lot more intense. And so what happens is during Guy, Raymond becomes regent again, and then obviously Baldwin takes over after a while, but then he dies. And when he dies, because of his leprosy, he doesn't have an heir. So he names his nephew, Sibylla's son, not through Guy, but through her her previous husband who died, William of Montferrat. Now Baldwin the Fourth's nephew, Sibylla's son, he's called Baldwin the Fifth. He's only 5 or 6 at that time, and he also has leprosy. But at that time, it wasn't known, obviously. At that time, they didn't know. After he became king, they realized they had leprosy, and he died. Now, in the case that he died, Raymond left a will saying that you will wait. Baldwin left a will, Baldwin IV, saying that Raymond will be regent until the Pope and the kings of the West, King of France and England and Germany, they come together and they appoint a king amongst you. And everybody agreed. But when that happened, nobody was waiting. They kicked Raymond out of the regency. And what happened was Sibylla, she was supported a lot by the outsider party, especially Reynold of Carac. Huge support of him. And so the nobles of court, the bishops, all of those guys, they agreed that, okay, Sibylla, you can be queen if you annul your marriage with Guy, because nobody likes him, especially after the events of Al-Fule. What happened in Al-Fule was that, or Al-Fula, whatever you want to say, is that Salahuddin, he went to attack, and then he waited in a position, and Guy, he was the leader of the army, he also waited in a position. And then what happened was Guy, he had access to basically a lake where there was a lot of fish and water, and they could river where they could take supplies off. But Salahuddin, he didn't, and his supplies were very low, so he had to retreat. Now, if Guy used this opportunity to attack the Salahuddin, he could have easily destroyed Salahuddin's army, but he doesn't. And the people in the court of Jerusalem, they start criticizing him a lot. And one of the main reasons why Raymond falls out, aside from the business with Reynold, is that, and that's why Guy is demoted from regency. And so because of this, so where was I forgot. Oh right, yes. So Guy because the court doesn't like him, Sibylla is forced to annul her marriage with Guy. But Sibylla puts one condition in the clause, and it's a very, very interesting story. Sibylla says that, okay, I will annul my marriage. They say you can be queen if you annul your marriage. The court says you can be queen if you annul your marriage. Sibylla says, okay, I will annul my marriage, but I have to choose my next husband. Now, the court says, okay, fine. And she's made queen. What Sibylla does afterwards is she marries Guy again. She marries Guy again, and Guy is made king of Jerusalem. And this enrages the court. And obviously some become really angry, and the others are like, oh yeah, what's happened? What can we do? Yeah, fine, we'll accept him. Two huge opponents are Raymond and Balian. And Balian and Raymond, they do not swear their allegiance to Guy. They say, we are not going to accept this guy as king, and they go back to their places. I can't remember where Balian went to. I think he went to Antioch, but I can't remember for sure where he went. But Raymond, he goes to Tiberias. This is where his wife is, and he goes and waits there. Or either Tiberias or Tripoli, I can't remember. Now, what happens is this succession crisis. So now we can see that two huge players, Raymond, the big player in the court, has a large army. He refuses to swear allegiance to Guy. Balian also refuses. And then obviously what happens is Salahuddin sees this, and at this time the idiot Reynold, he makes matters even worse, and he goes and he makes his pledge that he's gonna destroy the Muslims, the Kaaba, and he's gonna take the Prophet out of his grave and things like that. And so not this time, sorry. This was what happened before. And then what happened is Reynold, he attacks Muslim caravans again. Some sources even say that Salahuddin's sister was part of this caravan, and he kills all of them, including Salahuddin's sister. Now Salahuddin, he has the excuse he needs to break the truce with the Crusaders. He had a truce with the Crusaders that was negotiated under Raymond, but this is Salahuddin's excuse to break the truce. So he breaks the truce. Raymond sees this. Raymond, by trying to secure his own position, he makes a truce with Salahuddin. Says, "I'll let you enter through my land, but you need to help me fight Guy." And Salahuddin says, "Okay, fine." So they make a truce, like they won't fight each other. So then, and Salahuddin sends an advance army under his son Al-Afdal with 7,000 men into Jerusalem. So this is how into the Crusader army and they fight in Cresson. So this is really how the political instability led to Salahuddin's rise to power. And the reason the Crusaders, a lot of people ask, why didn't the Crusaders do anything? How could they let Salahuddin rise to power? But really, the Crusaders, they were so focused on fighting themselves than fighting the Muslims. And this is what the problem was with the Muslims earlier, when they lost Jerusalem, that they wanted to fight each other instead of fighting the Crusaders. And look at how the table turns. Now, the Crusaders, they're fighting each other, and they're focusing on each other. I want to get powerful in the court. This guy wants to get powerful in the court. And the Muslims, they finally united under one banner of Salahuddin. And this is obviously, if you read an article by Professor Caroline Hillenbrand, she actually says that the Muslims, they began to get united under one banner, under spiritual ideology of one banner of Salahuddin. And through this, they managed to take Jerusalem. So yeah, this is what the political instability and the things that were happening in the Crusader states.
Yeah, I guess you summarize it there at the end, how the tables did turn, how the Muslims at the start were very divided in their beliefs, their ideologies, and just in general, just wanted to fight each other. And now it's flipped over to the Crusaders. You see the discomfort in the court, and how there was so much internal conflict that it was actually affecting themselves, and just right under the nose of Salahuddin, were actually started to gain a stronghold, and it was all directions were pointing to the liberation, the conquest of Jerusalem. So now let's zoom in to a certain year, 1187, one for the history books. Salahuddin has completely surrounded Jerusalem, and the Crusaders, very disunited, and almost civil war-like mentality. What happened next? How did Salahuddin get into Jerusalem and liberate it?
Yeah, so this is Salahuddin's, what he's known for, his conquest of Jerusalem. So in 1187, we know what the situation is in the Crusader states. They are on the brink of civil war. Guy literally wants to take his army, and he wants to go and kill Raymond. He wants to either bring him in to his court and make him swear allegiance, or he's going to kill him. Now, like I said, Raymond, he makes a truce with Salahuddin, and Salahuddin enters Jerusalem through his lands. And then his son Al-Afdal, with 7,000 men, they defeat a small army of Templars, the military orders. Templars are one of the military orders of the Crusaders, Templars and Hospitallers. Now, so it was only about 350 knights they should try to make a desperate attempt to fight Al-Afdal's army. And Al-Afdal, 7,000 men against 350, there's no chance. Al-Afdal destroys them. And then what happens is, then Salahuddin brings his main army. They have, some say about 50,000, some say about 30. Something that would be ideal, a plausible amount, is about 30,000 men he had, because of what the various sources say. Some even say one letter that a survivor of the Battle of Hittin or the Siege of Jerusalem wrote said 200,000, but this is ridiculous. It's only about 30,000. So then Salahuddin brings his main army, and he camps near the horns of Hittin. Now the horns of Hittin are near the seas of Galilee, and behind him is Tiberias, and in front of him is, like, obviously the Crusader kingdom. Now, and the horns of Hittin are in the Crusader kingdoms. Now, Raymond sees this, and Balian sees this. Raymond, he says, okay, Guy sends some of the leaders of the court and tells them to Raymond, just come back, we need you now, otherwise we're all going to die. Otherwise Jerusalem's going to be lost if you don't come. Salahuddin's got 30,000 men, he's just down there, he's going to kill us all. Now, Raymond says, I've got to come back. So he goes back, and Guy welcomes him with open arms. Now, what happens is, from there they decide what to do. Now, Guy, he has a few options in front of him. He could go to he could either fight Salahuddin, open battle, risk losing everything, or he could do what the Crusaders have done throughout all of Nur-ad-Din's invasions. Stay in their fortified walls. The Muslims will come. Eventually, they'll run out of supplies, and they'll have to head back. So let them come. This is what Guy could have done, but instead, Guy feels that he needs to prove himself because of what happened at Al-Fula, and also because of previous things that have the political instability, and a lot of the people telling him, you gotta go fight. So he marches with about 20 to 25,000 men towards Hittin to take Salahuddin, defeat Salahuddin. His camps basically down the road at the springs of Safuriya, and there they have a good water source, so they stay there. Now Salahuddin sees, oh shoot, I have a problem now. Do I go? What should I do now? Because if they stay there again, eventually I'm going to run out of supplies. I can't fight. I can't stay here forever. I need to lure them into my territory, get them away from the water source, and bring them closer to me so I can defeat them. And this is really a sign of military ingenuity. He goes and he attacks Tiberius. Now Tiberius has Raymond's wife, and so he attacks Tiberius. He besieges it. He literally takes the city but leaves the citadel. He doesn't take the citadel, but he goes into the city and takes out the lower town, everything. And a messenger, most likely Salahuddin, who he let escape, but obviously some say he managed to escape himself. He takes a message to what's his name, Guy, who's just down there at the springs of Safuriya, and says, "You need to come." He's taking Tiberius. He's going to take Tiberius. He's outside the citadel. By not taking the citadel, Guy thinks there's still a hope of us taking back Tiberius. See how much of a military genius he was, really. By not taking the citadel, Guy would be more, he'll be more sort of open to coming towards Tiberius because he thinks you can still save the city. Now, what happens is Raymond, obviously his wife is there, and so Guy asks for advice from everyone. Raymond says, "Look, my wife is there. It's okay, fine, just leave it. Let's not go, because if you go there, he will defeat us. It's a trap. Don't go." So, and then, accusations of cowardice towards Raymond, saying you just like Salahuddin, you have a truce with him, you're a coward, get away from here, by obviously the outsider party, especially this guy called Gerald something. He's the head of the Knights Templar Order. And he tells him, no, he's a coward, don't listen to him. But then Guy, obviously, he sees the reason. He says, yeah, you know what, let's not go. So they decide, okay, we're going to stay here at the springs of Safuriya. Then Guy, at night time, obviously, the leader, the master of the Knights Templar Order, the head, he and someone else, they go into Guy's tent and tell him, you lost before Al-Thula. You need to go, and this is your chance. If you defeat Salahuddin, nobody will question your rule. Raymond, they can't attack Jerusalem. Salahuddin will be crushed. The Muslim world will look at him as a failure. You can go and you can defeat Salahuddin. In your position, nobody will question your kingship. Because there's so many questions around his kingship at this time. And nobody will even think about questioning his kingship. Now, what happens is he decides, okay, fine, you know what, I'm gonna go. And so in the morning, the trumpets blow, and one of the historians, can't remember the name. She says the decision to march to Tiberias was the most significant turning point in the history of the kingdom, and it led to its loss. This is how important it was. Salahuddin, he trapped him, he lured him in to coming. And then when Salahuddin, he starts coming towards, Guy starts coming towards the horns of Hittin and towards Tiberius mainly. Horns of Hittin were like, so this is Tiberius, horns of Hittin are about here in front, and then this is where Guy was at the springs of Safuriya, and Salahuddin's army is just towards like the south of the horns of Hittin. Now when Guy starts coming, you really need to imagine this, 30,000 men, fully armored, and this isn't light armor like the Muslims, where it's heavy chainmail, broad shields, broad swords are very heavy, broad shields are very big, very heavy, helmets, big armor, okay? And they're marching in the middle of the desert, no water, because Safuriya was their only water source, and there's no water source along the lines. It's only at Hittin, and so they have to make this long march to Hittin without any water. And a lot of the army, they're very, very thirsty. And Salahuddin, he sends his horse archers. Now everybody knows Turkish horse archers, they are very, very skilled, very, very powerful. They were the reason for a lot of conquests and the fall of empires and things like that. They were very, very powerful Turkish horse archers. Now, so during this, what happens is Salahuddin, he sends his archers and they start harassing Guy's army and stops them from marching. And obviously, they don't commit to like attacking them. They're just, bombarding them with arrows. throughout their march, noon, and then even throughout the night. He decides to camp there because of the movement became snail pace, and so he had to camp there in the desert. And so even throughout the night, he's throwing arrows at them. Shooting arrows at them. In the morning, they decide that their only hope is march towards the horns of Hittin, get some water there because they are thirsty. It's the middle of summer. It's the middle of the desert. Yeah. So he decides that, okay, we need to go to the horns of Hittin. Raymond gives him this advice. And so he says, yeah, fine, this is good advice. Let's go towards the horns of Hittin. When he goes to the horns of Hittin, they can't get any water because there are different sources claiming. Some say Salahuddin poisoned the wells. Some say that he's emptied the wells, made them dry. So then, what Salahuddin does is he orders his army forward. Now you guys go and attack them. And so also on this morning, he noticed the wind was blowing towards the Crusaders, and so he lit the brushwood. He lit on fire, and now so you have smoke coming in the direction of the Crusaders. Like smokes and the flames and things like that, the sparkles, that's all coming towards the Crusaders. It's just making things worse. You're thirsty and now you got very, very hot. It's making it even hotter, basically. Making artificially hotter, basically. So he and they do this, and the Muslims keep attacking them. And in the end, what happens is Guy orders Raymond's unit forward, and he says, "You need to charge, break through these lines, destroy them." And the Crusader charges were very, very strong because the horses, they were very armored, like well armored. So the thing was very strong. And so what the Muslims done is very, very smart. I think it was Salahuddin's brother, I can't remember his name. He opens his army up, a path in the middle. And so Raymond's unit, they just go straight through, and then they close rank. And Raymond's army, they don't bother coming back, they just go. And so, and Raymond, obviously, after he's accused of cowardice and desertion, treason, things like that. And so, a big portion of the army is gone. The Crusaders are now even smaller in number. They're very, very thirsty. And so, Salahuddin, he orders his army forward, and they start fighting. Salahuddin, he's watching from a distance. And his son, he starts, so the Muslims, they charge forward. And so, what happens, sorry, just one more thing, is that Salahuddin, the Crusaders have pitched their tents in the horns of Hittin because they've got no other option now. They've pitched their tents at Hittin, they're trying to camp, but they're also fighting the Muslims. Salahuddin's army is charging forward, the Ayyubids. Now, Salahuddin and his son are watching from basically from the back. So obviously this was customary. It's not like a coward or something. It's just customary for them, so they can order the army if things go bad. Like, what should we do? So what he does is very, very amazing story. The Muslims charge forward. Al-Afdal's son says, "Allahu Akbar, we've defeated them." Salahuddin says, "Shush," and then we haven't defeated them yet. And the Muslims, they get forced backwards by the Crusaders. The Muslims charge again. Al-Afdal says, "Allahu Akbar, we've won." The Crusaders charge back. Again, happens. Al-Afdal, Salahuddin's son says, "Allahu Akbar, we've won." Salahuddin says, "No, shush. When you see that tent, the tent of the king, when that one has fell, we have then won." When he says that, the tent of the king falls. What do you think Salahuddin does? He has spent more than a decade preparing for this siege, for this battle, for this big defeat. He has faced so much criticism in his life for fighting Muslims. What do you think he does? And it is so amazing. Instead of jumping up and down like some child, or instead of saying, "Yes, we've won," it's so amazing. He dismounts from his horse, he bows down in prostration, he does sujood, and tears are flowing from his eyes. This is how amazing it was, his response, and it really shows how pious he was. He doesn't jump up and down like a child. He doesn't start saying, "Yes, look what I've done." He doesn't start showing off. He doesn't do anything apart from dismount, bow down in sujood, and knows that victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what happens is So what happens afterwards is that he brings King Guy, Reynold, all these guys that he's captured, and they come, the knights, the Templars, all the knights he's captured. He brings Guy in front of him, he brings Reynold in front of him. He gives Guy some water, it's a bit of a flex, basically. He gives ice water to ghee in the middle of the desert. They're very thirsty, and he's giving them ice water in a very in like a jewel, like a cup that's like made of like jewels and things like that. And he gets ice, he gets water, and he gives it to him. Ghee refuses to drink it, or some say he drank a little bit, and he gives it to Reynold. Salahuddin became enraged and says to Reynold, "I didn't give you that cup. He gave you the cup." That basically means that if you give someone like a glass of water or like a cup of water, it means that you offer them protection. And he says, no, I didn't give you that water, so don't think I've given you protection. He gave you that water. Then by doing that, he fulfills his oath to the Muslims, to Allah, and he chops Reynold's head off. Ghee became scared, and he's like, "Oh man, what?" He's scared now. He just seen one of his leading commanders, his head get chopped off right in front of him. He's thinking, "I'm next." It says, "Khalas, it's finished." Salahuddin, really, and a great characteristic of it when he says, "It is not customary for one king to kill another king, so I won't kill you." And he doesn't kill him. He imprisons him, and I think he takes him back to Damascus. But then obviously he kills the Knights Templars, because these lot are just scum of the earth, basically. They are killing so many Muslims and things like that. They led the assault that Reynold did. It was with the Templars. And then after this battle, Salahuddin, the path to Jerusalem is open. He goes and he takes a lot of Crusader territory, one after another. And then in late September, he lays siege to Jerusalem. When he lays siege to Jerusalem, here we don't, the couple accounts we have from the Crusaders, really only one or two. You can go and you can read the works of Chronique de Arnold, or I don't know how to even how you say his name. So you can go and read. It's a continuation of the works of William of Tyre, and he mentions the siege. And so Salahuddin, he laid siege. He put his catapults in one place, and he sees that the Crusaders, we're going to beat them through this. And the sun is facing Salahuddin, while the Crusaders have their back to it. So then he goes around the city for a couple of days and looks for a new place. He lays siege to a new place. And there the sun is facing the Crusaders, and he has his back to the Muslims. Muslims had their back to the sun, and he lays siege to Jerusalem. And they kept falling. Muslims couldn't take it. And one day they actually eventually do manage to breach the city and put their flag on it, but then it gets taken down again. And then again they keep fighting, and then eventually they do manage to breach, but then they push back again. And the Crusaders, seeing this, really the army that was left was still quite a few thousand, but there were civilians who last minute they were sworn in. They were basically civilians who fled to Jerusalem after the Battle of Hittin. And so they keep fighting. And then in October, the 1st of October or late September, the Crusaders, they ask for terms. And Salahuddin says, "I initially offered you terms, you didn't accept it, so how on earth would I give you terms now? I'm literally going to take your city in the next few days. You're encircled, you don't have anywhere to go. I'm going to take your city. Why on earth would I give you terms? You rejected my terms when I gave it to you." Then Balian, who is in charge of the defenses now, he says, "If you don't give us terms, we will kill every single Muslim in Jerusalem. We will break Masjid al-Aqsa down. We will destroy everything, and you will have no reason to go to Jerusalem. We'll kill you, Muslims." And what do you think Salahuddin says after? Does he say, "Yeah, okay, fine, you kill the Muslims. I'm going to take your city either tomorrow or the day after. I'm going to kill all your Muslims. I'm going to destroy your church. And then I have the city, so I can rebuild the mosque, but I'm going to have your city. I won't let you rebuild your church. What are you going to do then?" And he doesn't say that, honestly. It shows how remarkable he was. Honestly, he doesn't say anything like that. Ajib, he says, fine, I'll give you terms. But why does he say that? Because he knows how much the Muslims have suffered, those who are left in Jerusalem. He knows how much they've suffered, and he doesn't want bloodshed anymore. He's a person who prefers diplomacy over war. So he says, fine, I'll give you terms. And he says that I will give safe conduct to Christians, or to all of you, back to Christian lands, provided you pay a ransom. And it's very, very small ransom. And so even then you might be thinking, okay, Salahuddin is offering ransom. Everybody talks about how generous he was, but he's still asking for ransoms. What about the people who can't pay? Salahuddin himself pays the ransom for the people who can't pay. And he sees, and really in stark contrast to the people who are leaving Jerusalem, the head of the church, these guys, they leave him with bags and bags of gold. The artifacts from the churches that are made of gold, they are leaving with them. They aren't paying a penny for the ransom of the poor, but Salahuddin himself pays. And then when he enters Jerusalem, this is really, really remarkable and shows his piety. His advisors tell him, let's destroy the Holy Sepulchre, let's destroy their church, because this is what one of the longest wars was the Muslims and the Crusaders. 8-9 crusades happened. Not all of them, obviously, towards the Muslims, but a lot of them were. And what he says is, his advisors say, let's destroy Jerusalem, and then, let's destroy the church, and then the Christians won't have any reason to come back, because they have nothing left here. Salahuddin says, no. A man better than me took this city, and he didn't destroy it, so I will not destroy it. And who is he talking about? He's talking about the life of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, the second Khilafah, when he took Jerusalem in 636, or I think 638, I can't remember, something like that, 636 to 638 in that region, in that time period. The Covenant of Umar, he gave everybody protection, he didn't destroy anything. Similarly, he said, I won't destroy it because he didn't. And really shows how much mercy he had. And it was this mercy and this piety and this character that allowed the Muslims to sort of unite under his banner and eventually take Jerusalem. And then obviously when he does take Jerusalem, he brings his master Nur-ad-Din's pulpit into Jerusalem, and obviously they carry on from there. Jerusalem under Muslim control, and it stayed that way obviously until recently. But from Salahuddin's conquest, Jerusalem was always under the Muslims until the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1918. So yeah, this is how Salahuddin really took Jerusalem. And if you do want to read more into this, there are multiple accounts, primary source accounts mainly. There are so many with Salahuddin. Ibn Shaddad's account, his biography, Ibn al-Athir. You can also do William of Tyre. Obviously, he died a bit earlier, so you don't have the whole account. It goes only until 1186, I think. He dies before the Battle of Hattin. But then you can read the continuation. The Squire of Balian, his name is Ernol. It's the Chronicle de Ernol, you can read from him. You can also, there are a few more. I'm just trying to think. Primary sources, what else would there be? You can read Imad al-Din's account. So you have Ibn al-Athir, Ibn Shaddad, Imad al-Din's account. Then obviously you have, but the best one is Ibn Shaddad's account. Although he was an eyewitness, he wasn't an eyewitness, but you know, he is the best all-round picture of Salahuddin, according to multiple historians. So yes, you can read that. For secondary sources, you can also read into Stanley Lane Poole, his book on the fall of Jerusalem. You can read God's War. I can't remember his name, the name of who done it. Yeah, but it's called God's War, so you can go read into these. These are very, very good books. So yeah, this is the conquest of Jerusalem in 1187 by Salahuddin.
On Allah, you've discussed as much as you can in the short time you have, because you can go on and on about tactics, about his knowledge, about his character of Salahuddin. But in the end, he did fulfill his promises. A lot of promises made, and as you said,
one thing. Sorry to disturb you, but one thing was he faced a lot of criticism for fighting. Yeah. I've mentioned this before, but he faced so much criticism for fighting Muslims for so long. But why? Why did you need to fight Muslims? Because Salahuddin understood that without unity, Jerusalem could never be taken. Yeah. And so he spent more time fighting Muslims and united them under one banner, and that made it so much easier to take Jerusalem. Because he was in the Crusader. He was in that area, the area of Jerusalem, Palestine, for about 4 or 5 months. He couldn't have done that unless he united the Muslims. So really, it shows how important it was. And I do have a source here that I've written down. If you just give me a minute.
Well, we can just see how important unity was, because on the flip side, the disunity and the dysfunctional, the internal crisis for the Crusaders ultimately led to their own downfall. So, it's very valid.
Dr. Nicholas Morton, she, if you read an article written by her, if you just search up Dr. Nicholas Morton, Salahuddin, we'll find it. So she goes that, so obviously after Salahuddin had taken Egypt and Syria in 1174, after he'd taken Syria, she says, from this moment onwards, Salahuddin was able to yoke Egyptian wealth to the Turkish manpower of Syria, and this potent mix gave him the ability to contemplate to Sorry, let me read that again. That was very bad. From this moment onwards, Salahuddin was able to yoke Egyptian wealth to the Turkish manpower of Syria. And this potent mix gave him the ability to contemplate the overthrow of the Crusader kingdom. Without this conjunction of the wealth and manpower, such a goal would have been unthinkable. It really shows how important it is. Because if he didn't, without Egypt's wealth and the manpower of Syria, there is no way he could have taken Jerusalem. It's just not enough. He needs the Syrian army, and he needs to sort of supply them with Egyptian wealth. And by combining the two together, that's when he is able to take Jerusalem.
Yeah, that segues us nicely into our final talking point. We're reaching the end now, and it will be befitting of this great conquest and the great man that we have been discussing in this stream to evaluate the factors that led to the conquest. Was it Salahuddin's leadership? So this is the question I'll pose to you. Was it his leadership that primarily led to the conquest of Jerusalem? Or was it the weakness of the Crusaders that allowed the conquest to take place? Essentially, I'm asking, to what extent was it Salahuddin's leadership that led to the conquest of Jerusalem? If you could just give a quick answer to that.
Yeah, so that's a very important question because from like an academic perspective, history is not like just one thing. Okay, Salahuddin took Jerusalem, so Salahuddin. There were a lot of factors which helped him to take Jerusalem, like the weakness of the Crusaders, the weak leadership of Guy of Lusignan. If he did a march to Hittin. If you did a march towards Tiberias, you also have, there's so many factors. You also have the weak international relations of the Crusaders, the fact that they couldn't get any reinforcements from Byzantium or the West. Then you also have the foundations that were laid by Imad ad-Din Zengi and Nur ad-Din. So was it really that? Was Salahuddin sort of like a, not like, I wouldn't want to say victim, but how would you describe it, Ismail? Like, was he more of like a sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but like someone who just managed to go with the flow of things? And
was he just a opportunist? Just takes advantage of all in front of him.
Someone who took advantage of opportunities because of all the opportunities that were presented to him. Nur ad-Din had taken Syria.
Yeah.
Egypt was very weak. It was very easy to overthrow the Fatimid Khilafah. The Crusaders were very weak. They had barely had much of an army left. Was it really that, or was it because of Salahuddin? But I still think that after comparing with everything, from an academic perspective, like comparing with all the different sources, like someone like Dr. Sulaiman Murad, he does put a good argument forward that he says in his in an article that the other misconception is about Salahuddin's military prowess. His main achievement was largely an anomaly, and Salahuddin defeated the Crusaders at Hittin because of a fatal miscalculation on their part, rather than any military or strategic prowess he had. But I don't really agree with this because you have to really think about what Salahuddin did. Syria, he could have taken Syria with his army, with the army of Egypt, but then he would have been seen as a usurper. So he took it through his political skill. And then he went campaigning in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia wasn't, really weak. Yeah, it was weak, but it still took him a lot of effort to take it. But the fact that whenever he would be fighting in Syria or Mesopotamia, the Crusaders would attack, so he'd have to come back. Whenever he's fighting the Crusaders, he had to go back and fight the Syrians, or in Mesopotamia. Now, so you see that he needed someone who had the military skill and political skill for him to do that. And by uniting those two kingdoms, he was, like I said before, he was able to campaign in the Crusader kingdoms for a very long time. I really, really think it is Salahuddin's leadership. Because even though Nur ad-Din existed, the weaknesses were there at that time, he wasn't really able to take it. And the Fatimid Khilafah was weak, so Nur ad-Din could have taken that as well. But really, Salahuddin's political ingenuity, military ingenuity, enabled him to accomplish such a feat. And, the Battle of Hittin, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy thing to do, to lure the Crusaders out to meet him. The Crusaders
we see in history, the most successful liberators or in history who go through many wars, they're always downplayed. Their achievements are always pushed to the side to try to say, but that in itself is a sign of how much how important his role was in it. You know, the weaknesses were all there, but it takes a certain man to actually take advantage of all of this. 100%. So I think, I guess in an hour we've discussed a story which you can go on hours about, days
there are
about.
many books written about this, so 500-600 pages long.
It's we've done. You know what? I thank you, brother Maheer, for giving as much effort and trying to give justice to this story, because it's very difficult to do so in our time. So let's just go through a quick conclusion. Brother Maheer, you've talked at the start, so 1099, how after that the Crusaders actually took Jerusalem, how disunified the Muslims were, how Nur ad-Din, the Zangid dynasty, Fatimid Khilafah, all of these factors, we won't repeat ourselves now. So, all of these factors, and how Salahuddin rose, unified, and, took over and took advantage of the fact of Crusader weakness, and through his military prowess, his piety, and his belief in Allah, how much Islam played a role in his life, and how that in turn allowed him to be successful. So as we come to the end of the live stream, firstly we'd like to thank Brother Maheer for the amount of time and effort he's put into this, and he's done a good job in recounting this wonderful story. We'd like to thank everyone for listening in. Hopefully this has been beneficial, and at Islam's Peace we are always open to feedback, so anything you have questions about, Brother Maheer will be happy to answer to, and any feedback on how we can improve will also be very helpful for us. So we will end with that. If you have any departing words, Brother Maheer.
No, just one thing I'd like to highlight from what we've spoken about, and that is the importance of learning Islamic history. Many of the ulama, they agree that Islamic history is one of the most understudied Islamic sciences presently.
Yeah.
And that's, unless we know, whenever I speak to someone, I always emphasize the importance of Islamic history. Many of us, we don't know enough about our own people. The rapid expansion into Syria, early expansion into Syria, Iraq, it really, the Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh, how many of us really know that arguably he was the greatest military general who ever existed in all history? How many of us really know that? We need to know Islamic history, because unless we know Islamic history, we can't know how our predecessors dealt with the problems. Because we are facing similar problems. It's not like we're facing completely different problems. We still are facing similar problems. So we need to know how our predecessors dealt with it, so that we too can deal with it.
Yeah.
And just learn it to be proud. Be proud of your history. We know everybody's proud of their history. The British, the Americans, they're all proud of their history. Why are we not proud of our history? Why do we want to hide it? A lot of the academics themselves argue that our history is the most beautiful history there is, because we didn't spread Islam through the sword. I did a live stream on this earlier, a couple months ago, speaking about how Islam wasn't spread through the sword. We don't need to be ashamed of anything we've done.
Salahuddin is an example of exactly that.
Exactly, 100%. 100%. That our history is beautiful, and don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Embrace it and be proud of it, because our history arguably has contributed so much to the modern world. The advancements in science, in technology. People call us a backward religion, but really they haven't studied the golden age. They haven't studied the military. Also, Khalid bin Walid's military. He revolutionized. I don't know how to say the word.
Revolutionized. Yeah.
Yes. You did this, whatever it is, to military strategy. People use him as an example of thing. We need to know our history, and we need to be proud of it.
I guess if you look in our times now, there's a lot of confusion regarding Islam. Obviously by non-Muslims, but even Muslims ourselves, we're tested a lot that we end up swaying away from our religion. But maybe, if you are listening into this, one of the main philosophies at Islam's Peace is bringing Islamic knowledge. And, not only are we learning ourselves, we're also trying to spread it, which is one of the best things you can do as a Muslim. It's not something for us to do in terms of showing off, or for like our benefit only. It's for everyone's benefit. So we hope that not only do you take advantage of the services we're providing on platforms, but also just not staying idle. As a Muslim, young Muslim, however old you are, just with all the resources in front of you online, not only is Islamic Peace providing many Islamic history, Islamic knowledge, you can also go and figure out so much stuff about your religion, and that will in turn strengthen your religion. So that is our departing words. Hopefully we have a live stream coming up soon, which we'll let everyone know about. Stay in contact on Instagram, YouTube, of course, and all other social medias which are in the description. So that is it for today's live stream. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إلى درب الهدى والخير يهدي وللجنات يوصل من يسير كتاب الله للأرواح
يا إله الوجود قد سئمت القيود كبلتني ذنوب ومللت الخطوب أنت رب رحيم مدني بهداك وارعاني بحماك واقبلا توبتي واغسلا حوبتي أنت رب رحيم إنني قد أتيت تائبا ومضيت فحملت الهدى صادقا في المدى أنت رب رحيم يا إله الورى تهت فوق الثرى أبتغي عزة أعطيني نصرة أنت رب رحيم دمعة سقتها توبة قلتها سريد للإله نطقتها الشفاء أنت رب رحيم نطقتها الشفاء أنت رب رحيم نطقتها الشفاء